There was a time when a potato peel was not trash, a corn cob was not finished, and even stale crackers had value. Families facing some of the hardest years in history found ways to transform what little they had into meals that kept hunger at bay. Today, we revisit 23 food tricks so ingenious they sound almost unbelievable, yet millions once depended on them to get through another day. Coffee soup. The Amish were already the most frugal people in America, but the Depression broke even that. Most were farmers, and when agriculture collapsed, their already bare pantries became even barer. So they built breakfast from what nobody else thought to use. Yesterday's leftover coffee. Strong brew poured hot over torn stale bread, sugar if you had it, and a splash of cream if you were lucky. That was coffee soup. The hot liquid softened the bread into something close to porridge. Fast forward to now, and younger generations in Pennsylvania barely know it existed. But the families who made it never forgot the smell of that bowl on a cold morning. Up next, corn, and what families made from it made coffee soup look complicated. Cornmeal mush. Corn kept many families fed when other staples became hard to afford. A bag of cornmeal could stretch across dozens of meals, making it a fixture on breakfast tables across America. The simplest version was cornmeal mush cooked with water and salt. Yet the real trick came the next morning. When left overnight, leftovers hardened. They were then sliced into thick pieces, then fried in saved bacon grease until crisped on the outside and tender on the inside. A little molasses transformed it into a luxurious treat. In parts of the South, it appeared at nearly every meal. Now imagine a situation where not even cornmeal was available, when a family had to invite the neighbors over and cook with nothing but water and a clean stone. Stone soup. Stone soup sounds like a made-up story, yet its message matched a harsh Depression reality. A single family might have almost nothing, however, a whole street had enough for everyone. One neighbor brought onion peels, another offered carrot tops, someone else came with a potato skin or an old soup bowl. The stone itself was never part of the ingredients. It gave people a reason to gather around one spot. Hours of simmering pulled flavor from the scraps every kitchen discards today. That way, a meal that cost pennies could feed an entire crowd. But the next dish kept entire armies marching, and it came with a nickname so colorful we can't say it aloud on this channel. SOS, chipped beef on toast. Few meals have a stronger reputation than chipped beef on toast. Soldiers gave it a nickname that cannot appear in most cookbooks, yet the Army kept serving it for decades. The reason was simple. When dried beef was stored well, it could last longer and feed larger groups with little effort. Case in point, a 1910 Army recipe prepared enough for 60 men, enough to keep them nourished and march on. The beef usually arrived packed with salt. Therefore, many families rinsed it before cooking. A white sauce stretched a small amount of meat across many plates. However, it was not a reserve of the Army, as factory workers ate it too. Yet coal miners needed something different, and their meal carried an unexpected purpose. The onion sandwich. Coal miners carried onion sandwiches underground for one strange reason: the smell. Raw onion between two slices of bread was so sharp and aggressive that no coworker would go near it, and that meant nobody touched your lunch. Apart from it being a theft deterrent, miners also believed it cleared their lungs of coal dust. The anti-inflammatory properties of raw onion gave that belief real grounding. Even kids at home got the same sandwich, sometimes with a pinch of sugar pressed into the slices to cut the sharpness. The Depression's version of a flavor upgrade. These onions cost almost nothing, but delivered vitamin C and B6 without fail. But there was another sandwich for school-going children that told a much darker story about how far a family had really fallen. The mustard sandwich. The mustard sandwich was seen as the ultimate signal of knee-deep hardship. No meat or cheese, just bread and a thin layer of mustard. It sounds unbelievable now, yet many families relied on it when unemployment bit hard and grocery money ran out. The sharp flavor served a purpose. It made the absence of meat less noticeable. Children carried these lunches to school, often unaware of the sacrifice behind them. Years later, many Depression survivors still remembered those sandwiches, not for the flavor, but for what they represented. Surprisingly, one inexpensive meat soon became a favorite among children despite tracing its origins as another budget solution. Fried bologna. Bologna is ground pork scraps, odds and ends left after every real cut was taken. During the Depression, families ate it cold for lunch, then fried it for dinner. The trick every mother knew was to cut one slit into the edge before placing it on the pan. Without that cut, the slice would curl into a bowl shape. The cut, however, made the edges get crisp and the center puffed into a dome. Kids came up with the name for those domes: Bologna bubbles. They had no idea it meant money was gone, and they were just a level above the bottom rung. When the 2008 recession hit, bologna sales surged 125%. It turns out that some signals never change. The next recipe pushed creativity further, turning pantry staples into pure deception. Mock apple pie. Ritz crackers launched in 1934, right in the gut of the Depression. Within a year, Nabisco had sold 5 billion boxes. But the real story is not the cracker, it's what mothers did with it. During this period, fresh apples were too expensive and scarce. As such, the recipe printed on the box became the solution. Crackers simmered in a sugar syrup with cream of tartar and lemon. The cream of tartar mimicked the acidity of cooked apple. The cracker softened into something that looked, smelled, and tasted like fruit filling. Cost then 18 cents. A real apple pie cost 75 cents. In hard times, saving 57 cents was no small victory. And not far from that same kitchen, a can of tomato soup became something good enough to make a famous poet write home about it from England. Tomato soup cake. A can of tomato soup does not sound like dessert. Yet, during the Depression, bakers came up with a genius discovery involving that very can. The thing is, milk costs money. Butter was costlier and way out of many people's financial reach. But soup was often easier to find. And that's how condensed tomato soup found its way into cake batter. The result surprised almost everyone. Instead of tasting like tomatoes, it produced a moist spice cake filled with cinnamon, nutmeg, and clove. Campbell's traced versions of this recipe to the late 1920s and early 1930s. Years later, even poet Sylvia Plath baked it and mentioned it in one of her letters to her mother. Turning soup into cake was impressive, yet some bakers soon faced a tougher challenge: no eggs, butter, or milk. Wacky cake. A Depression-era cake was bare minimum. It came with no eggs, milk, or even butter. Vinegar hit baking soda and produced carbon dioxide, which lifts the batter the same way eggs would. Vegetable oil stepped in where butter could not. 3 holes were then punched into the dry mix in the pan, vinegar in one, vanilla in another, and oil in the third. Water was then poured over everything. That method alone tells you everything about that era. It was nothing but chemistry and necessity producing something genuinely delicious. The wacky cake proved dessert could come from almost nothing. But what about a dessert made from literally nothing but water, sugar, flour, and a secret that families kept for decades out of pure shame? Water pie. The water pie was survival dressed up in a pie crust. Water, sugar, flour, a pat of butter, and vanilla was everything a family needed. Inside a hot oven, those bare ingredients pulled off a smooth, custard-like filling that many would find unbelievable today. Families rationed sugar for weeks just to make this happen. Some grandmothers even sold them door to door for extra income. But ask their grandchildren about it and you are met with complete silence. The poverty was too raw and the shame was too heavy. It never made it into a single vintage cookbook. Moving on, the next Depression dessert came from something no child would ever guess was on their plate: potato candy. Potatoes filled stomachs across Depression-era America, but one recipe pulled off a stranger trick that turned them into candy. A scoop of plain mashed potato would be mixed with powdered sugar until a soft dough appeared and potato taste vanished completely. Peanut butter was put across the surface, the dough rolled into a log, and in the end, each slice revealed a neat pinwheel. Families loved it because potatoes cost little, but the result felt special. The recipe spread throughout communities where every ingredient mattered. Today, old recipe cards are bringing it back online, with many first-time bakers expressing surprise by the flavor. Even so, the most remarkable potato dish of the era was not made from the potato itself. It came from something most modern cooks send straight to the trash. Potato peel soup. Potatoes never stopped giving during this period. One of its most revealing roles came from the part most people throw away today. Families saved potato peels and turned them into a hearty soup with onions, flour, and the little milk that was available. That choice came from necessity as well as the knowledge of the richness of the peels. That skin contains more fiber, potassium, and iron than the potato itself. Across America, Ireland, Germany, and Scandinavia, nearly identical versions appeared. In the end, this was not a shared recipe. Far from it. It was the same problem across oceans producing the same answer. And in kitchens from Shanghai to Chicago, another dish was performing the same miracle by turning a single egg into a bowl of something beautiful enough to make children believe they were eating something luxurious. Egg drop soup. One egg could feed 4 people. During the Depression, meat was scarce in many homes, and that's where a pot of broth came into the picture. As the beaten egg mixed with the hot liquid, thin golden ribbons appeared across the surface. That transformation felt almost extravagant, and children saw something special. On the other side, parents saw a meal stretched farther than anyone expected. Versions of egg drop soup arrived in America with Chinese immigrants and found a place far beyond Chinese communities. Even broth made from scraps gained new appeal, one where a single egg delivered protein, comfort, and a sense of abundance. Still, these people find ways to push limits, and that was seen when they found a way to stretch protein after the ham was gone and only the bone remained. Ham hocks and beans. The butcher saved the worst cut for last. The ham hock is usually heavily salted, mostly bone and collagen. It's the part that nobody else wanted, but farming families happily took it. They would then smoke it and stretch it across an entire winter. They would soak dry beans overnight and then simmer them all day with onions and that single bone. By day 3, the pot thickened into something families called temporary beans. That was a quiet humor masking a hard truth as they were milking that bone until it had nothing left to give. Today, chefs call this nose-to-tail cooking and charge accordingly for it. So, what happened on the weeks there was no ham hock but dry peas and an empty pot? Well, these families still found a way to turn near nothing into a family ceremony. Pea soup with dumplings. Thursdays smelled the same in every Scandinavian household across the Midwest: dried peas, onion, and water. What followed was a full day of low heat to turn them into something that kept families going. A ham bone made it even more luxurious. However, on most occasions, there was no ham bone, so the dumplings carried the meal. Then came the counting, where every child tracked every dumpling placed on every bowl. The policy here was equal shares with no exceptions whatsoever. The ritual held something more important. Fairness enforced inside genuine scarcity handed the weight of ceremony. Meanwhile, just outside the kitchen window, another food source was growing wild and free, one that today costs $12 a bunch at upscale restaurants. Food did not always come from a store. Sometimes it came from the yard. Families often watched for young dandelion leaves each spring. Picking them before age brought a sharper bite. A little vinegar and warm bacon drippings could turn a common weed into a meal enjoyed by an entire family. Apart from being a result of desperation, dandelion greens contain substantial amounts of vitamins A and C, plus iron and potassium. Years later, those same greens started appearing on restaurant menus under a different reputation and price tag. What once signaled hardship gradually became a specialty. But there was an even stranger source of sweetness waiting on the dinner table: corncob jelly. Sweetness was hard to come by during rationing, but corn cobs offered an answer few people would have guessed. Once every kernel was gone, the cob still held value. Boiled in water, they released a fragrant liquid with a mild sweetness. Mothers would also mix them with sugar and pectin. The resultant liquid became a golden jelly that many compared to honey or wildflower preserves. Families spread it on biscuits and cornbread when the price of fruits went beyond their financial reach. Today, corn cob jelly has returned through small batch producers. Then, there is the next dish that managed to turn discarded meat into a breakfast so satisfying it's still eaten today in diners across Pennsylvania. Scrapple. Wasting any part of a slaughtered pig was to Pennsylvania Dutch families an unforgivable moral failure. Scrapple was made from everything the butcher could not sell: scraps, organ meat, and offcuts. They would be boiled, blended with cornmeal and spices, and then packed into loaf molds overnight. Come morning, thick slices would be fried on a cast iron pan. The outside crackled while the inside stayed soft and deep with flavor. They nicknamed it poor man's bacon. For anyone who grew up with it, that first sizzle in the pan still pulls them straight back to cold childhood mornings. The same philosophy of stretching the meat, wasting nothing, and making it last produced another dish entirely, one you've almost certainly had for dinner recently with zero idea where it actually came from. Depression meatloaf. A pound of meat could disappear fast at the dinner table. And that's why Depression-era cooks came up with a strategy to ensure that did not happen. They did so by stretching ground beef with stale bread, oats, crackers, rice, and grated vegetables. The result looked generous even when meat was scarce. Flavor came from seasoning and a long bake rather than expensive ingredients. There were some versions that contained as much filler as beef. Here, even ketchup earned a role, adding color and richness at little cost. What had begun as necessity grew in popularity and became a national comfort food. But when even the smallest amount of meat was out of reach, cooks found a way to make ground meat and uncooked rice work together in a form that looked unusual on the plate. Porcupine meatballs. Kids saw the name of this meal and thought it was a game. But adults knew exactly what it was: survival math. Rice was cheap and available, but meat was not. Therefore, mothers mixed uncooked long-grain rice straight into ground beef, rolled it into meatballs, and dipped them into tomato soup. In the oven, the rice swelled through the surface. That way, 1 pound of beef could comfortably feed 6 people. Decades later, millions still make them today with zero idea they were cooking a Depression survival recipe. The next dish was named after the president most Americans blamed for the mess they were in. Hoover stew. Food relief carried a heavy name during the Depression. Hoover stew became one of the most visible examples. Community kitchens made it from the donations they received. Pasta formed the base for bulk. Hot dogs, canned corn, or tomatoes filled the gaps when available. That flexibility was critical as supply never stayed the same. One day it leaned heavy on starch, another day on scraps of protein. Therefore, no 2 pots matched. Regardless, the result still fed entire groups at low cost, often in school cafeterias or relief lines. Back in the individual kitchens, something much older and quieter was simmering on the back stove. Perpetual soup. Food insecurity during this period forced kitchens into constant adaptation. As such, a single pot stayed on the stove for days. Families called it perpetual soup. They would put anything edible into that pot: vegetable skins, leftover bones, pasta water, even liquid from canned goods. Each addition changed the soup's flavor. The idea spread across rural homes and urban boarding houses because it reduced waste to near zero and kept people full. And that pot was never emptied, only renewed. That rhythm created the much-needed continuity in households facing uncertainty. Which trick caught your attention? Comment below and remember to subscribe for more videos as we go down memory lane.